That's the initial code that you're gonna see when you create a new Expo project. Let's explain every line of code here, but first let's get rid of this status bar. We're gonna talk about later. It's a component to handle this status bar. Let's delete it for now. Now first we have here three imports: APIs and component. This text component, that's a view component, and we here import StyleSheet from React Native. When you want to use view or text or image, you have to import it from React Native like this. Just type the name of component. And don't worry, we're gonna cover the most important components here in this course. So let's remove this. So this line is for imports. When you want to use something, you have to import it first. We export here our component to use it anywhere that we want. So we here just type export default function, and here the name of component. We named it app because React component is a functional component, so we just create a function and export it. And inside this function, we're gonna return the UI, any UI that you want. We have here return a view. That's a React Native component. We import it here. And this view, it's like a container for other components. We're gonna talk about it later. And we have here a text. That's another React Native component. We use it to render texts. For example, you can just type here whatever you want. For example, hello world, and press save. If you see here, we got here hello world. Our app got updated. Finally, we have here style sheet. We're gonna talk about this style sheet later, don't worry. Inside our style sheet, we have here an object called container. We have here 4 style properties. First, the Felix one, that's the mean. The Felix one prefer to flexibility. So our component, app component, take 1 from entire screen. If we just make it a half like this, now he only takes the half of screen. You're gonna understand me when we change the background color. We have here background color. We can make it red. Look, now when we change the background color, we find that our app only takes the half of screen. We can return it to 1 again to take the entire screen. Okay, and we have here align items. This a property to center the UI horizontally. For example, if we just remove it, now it got here at the start of screen because we removed the align items of center. And we have here also justify content to center the UI vertically. If we just remove it, look, the text at the top. If you think things are difficult, don't worry, we're gonna talk about styles and UI. But first, we have here a problem. Look, the text, no one can see the text because it's at the top. We want to make a save area to this status bar because we don't want our text to be at the top like that. How to do this? That's what we're gonna learn in next lesson with our first component, SafeAreaView. So don't miss next lesson. In previous lesson, we have a problem. This text, we cannot see it after we remove because this notch and the status bar are hiding it. So we want to create a safe zone for our components and UI, not to be behind this notch because we want our users can see them. So now let's learn our first and one of the easiest components in React Native and called SafeAreaView. To use any component, as I have mentioned before, to use any component, you just need to import it. So let's add a comma and add SafeAreaView. This is the component that's responsible to create a safe zone to our UI. So let's replace our view with SafeAreaView and press save. When we press save, see, our text now is visible and it's not behind our status bar and not behind our notch. Now it's in a safe and visible place. If you wonder how can you change two words together, you just need to hide one of them and press Command and D if you use Mac. This means that's a multi-cursor editing. You can, when you have two or more words with the same name, just highlight one of them and just type Command and D. Once you have now can change in two places if you press Command and D. Also, now you can change in three places. Look, you can type whatever you want. In Mac, Command and D. In Windows, I think Control and D. Okay? So now that was our first and easiest component, SafeAreaView. Let's talk in next lesson about more components. Today we're going to talk about another very important component called text. The text, you can use it to display any text in your app. For example, this hello world text. We can change it to make it title. For example, look, I want to mention very important thing. To use text or any core component, you need to import it from React Native. Like here, if you didn't import it like that and press save, you're gonna get this error. Property text doesn't exist. So you need to import it. Just type here text. Now the error is gone. You can style your text using the style property. Just type here style and open an object and put any style that you want. For example, we have here a style property called text align to make it on the left or in the right. Look, our text in the right. You can make it in the center of screen. Now our text in the center of screen. You can increase its font size using font size property. For example, let's give it 50 pixels. Now it becomes bigger. You can add the weight to it using this property, font weight. You can add 100 or 400 or make it bold. Now our text become bold. You can color it with any color that you want using the color property. For example, red, blue, or even any hex color like that, like this color. Our code is not formatted. If you want to format your code, just highlight it and press Command K and F. Using Mac, using Windows, just type Control K and F. Okay? Let's create another text, but let's make it very long. Let's add a new text. And let's add a very long text, like this text. We can style this text also, just using the style property. Just type style and open object. You can here put in styles that you want. For example, we can add font size and make it 20 to make it bigger. You can justify this text if you are using text align, justify to make it like that. And you can also use a nested text. For example, if you want to add here a word with color red and underline, you can make it. You can add here, for example, here a text, and inside it just type press here, and you can give him style of color red. Okay, and we can make a text decoration line underline to make it underline like that. That's another property. This is another style property. We can also add a property called onPress to the text to make something when we press on this text. Let's make this property alert text pressed. So when we press here, we got an alert with text pressed. Don't worry about this alert, we're gonna talk about it later. We can also set the limit of this text line. For example, this very tall text, we can add here number of lines to make it just 2. Now those are 2 lines. We can make it 3. Now those are 3 lines, only 3 lines. Our code looks ugly. Why it looks ugly? Because we put this style in this text. We're gonna talk about later about StyleSheet to put our styles here at the bottom and don't get the styles involved inside this text or inside any another React Native component. So we've talked about the most important properties in text, but feel free to visit React Native documentations to know more and more about text and another properties that you can help you when you build your app, because it helps you better understanding of the capabilities of your component. If you have a look at this code, you're gonna notice this. Our code is not clean and not concise. But why? Because we are using here inline style object. And this make our code ugly, looks ugly and not concise. So how to make our code cleaner? We have here an API from React Native called StyleSheet. This StyleSheet is a way to define and apply styles to components, similar to how CSS is used in web development. But in React Native, we are using JavaScript objects to describe styles. I'm gonna show you. First, you make sure this style sheet is imported from React Native. Okay? Second, you're gonna down here and define it. Just type const styles equals to stylesheet.create. And this create method is taking an object. And you can put inside this object the name and properties of a styling. For example, let me show you. We have here an object with some properties: text align, font size, font weight, and color. We want to move those styles down here. How to do this? First, you just need to cut them, pass here in this object styles dot, and name any thing that you want. For example, title text. This title text, you can change it to whatever you want, but please choose a name that is referred to the style. Okay, if you go down, put the name that you selected at the top. It was title text, and he's gonna be equals to the object, like that. If you go up, we have here also 2 inline styles still. We can make the same thing. For example, here in this text, we can cut this and give it styles dot any title we want. For example, subtitle text, and go down and add subtitle text. Finally, we have here the last one. We can cut it and give it a name. For example, red text, and go down and initialize it, red text, and press save. If you notice, nothing got changed, because putting styles at the down is working the same if you put it inline object. Finally, let's format our code. You can format it using Command and Shift and K if you are using Mac, or Control Shift and K if you are using Windows, or you can make it like this. Right click and press on Format Document. Look, Now our code looks much better than before. And thanks to this StyleSheet API from React Native. In this lesson, we're gonna talk about images. First, let's clean up this code. Let's remove those parts and also those styles. If you want to add an image to your app, you just need to import it from React Native. So let's clean this and type image. Image is a React Native component we're gonna use to render images to the app. Okay, how to use this component? You can just type image, since we're not gonna put anything between them, so you can make it self-closing tag like that. Okay, this image take a main property called source. Inside source, you have to pass require function, require, and inside require, just you need to put the path of your image. For example, we have here in our app, we have a folder called assets. Inside this assets, you can find a couple of images like this, or like this icon, or this splash. Let's try to render this icon. To render this icon, you have to put the path to it. We are here in the root folder and the assets folder inside the root. So you just add one dot splash. Then select assets, then add splash and add the icon name. For example, it's called splash icon.png. So let's type splash icon.png and press save. Now we've rendered this image, but it takes all of the screen. So we need to give it a height and width. So let's close this and add to it styling. So just add the style property and it's gonna be styles.image1, for example. We are using here the style sheet. So let's add this object here, image1, and add width and height. Let's make the height 200 pixels and the width 200 pixels as well. Now we got here our image with 200 pixels of height and 200 pixels of width. If you are worrying with those paths, we're gonna talk about those paths later, don't worry. But I want to mention a very important thing. When you use this require function, you are loading the image locally and add those images to the bundle, and this will lead to a big bundle size, and that's not good for optimization and performance. So we prefer not to use require in all cases, except if you need to use it. So there is another way to add images to your app. You can add them from a URL. For example, if we open a website called Lorem Biscom, this is an image generator. You just need to copy this link and go to our code and create a new image. Inside it, we're gonna pass the source, but inside URI. We're gonna not using required. We're gonna use URI. And just put the link here and press save. Let's see. Now our image is not appear because we need to give it a height and width, because rendering the image using URI is different from require. Require is get the image with the height and width of the image selected. But when you are using URI, it doesn't get the height and width from internet. So we need to add a style for it. Let's add style and just type styles dot, let's make it image2. Now let's define it down here, image2, and let's give him also height and width of 200 and press save. Now we got here our image. If you have a look at the official documentations of React Native, you're gonna find a lot of useful properties for images. For example, we have here a property called blur radius. This, if you want to make a blur effect to your image. For example, let's copy it and try it. Let's try it in second image. Blur radius, let's make it, for example, 10. Now see what happens to the image. We have also a couple of properties and event that you can use. So you can have a look at these documentations and try a couple of those properties if you want. One last thing I want to mention. What if you want to make your image as a circle? To make it as a circle, you have to add a border radius property and give it the half value of height and width. For example, we have here 200 and 200, so let's make the border radius 100. Now it becomes a circle. In this lesson, we're gonna talk about buttons and touchables. When you want to use a button in Android or in iOS, you just need to import the button component. It's called button. You have to import it from React Native. Now let's add it here. Now let's render it here. Button, because we're not gonna put something between them, so we can make it self-closing tag. This button takes two important properties. The first property is the title of the button. For example, let's make it press on me. The second property, what to do when we press on it. Let's go here and declare a function. Const on button press. This is a function, a simple function is gonna create a simple alert, okay? Alert. Let's type, for example, button pressed. If you notice here, we auto import the alert from React Native. Okay, this is something called auto import. Now inside our button, there is a function called onPress. And let's pass this function in it. Now let's press save. Now let's see what happens when we press on that button. Let's press. Now we have here an alert called button pressed. This is the button in iOS. Let's see the button in Android. Here is the button shape in Android. Press on me. When we press, that's the alert, button pressed. Now, what if you want to make anything pressable or touchable? For example, this image or a text or anything. Is there a way in React Native to make this image pressable? Of course there is. We have a couple of components. The most important of them are touchable, opacity, and pressable. Those are two components. You can import it from React Native. And now let's see how to use them. For example, to make this image pressable without any feedback, we can use this pressable component. For example, let's add it. Let me show you. Let's add the pressable and just copy the code of the image and put it inside the pressable. Now we can do something when we press on this image. Okay? Just to add on press. We have here on press and on long press. You can also use this on long press when you press too long on the image. But let's now use on press and pass inside this property the on press function here. And let's press save and see. Now when we press on that image, look, the alert appeared. Look. There are another component called touchable opacity. We can just replace this pressable with touchable opacity here and here and press save. It's doing the same thing, but when we press, will notice something. See, image is, there is kind of opacity. Let's hide this function to show you. Look what happens to the image. It fade in and appear again. It got faded and appear again. That's what touchable opacity do. Now you've learned two components, touchable opacity and pressable. You can use any of them to make anything in the screen is touchable and can be touched and do something. In this lesson, we're gonna learn ScrollView. We use this component. We want to make our screen scrollable. For example, let's duplicate this image. Let's make it a lot of images and press save. If you see the bottom content, we cannot reach them. We cannot reach the button and the other image because our app is not scrolling. How to make our app scrolling? That's easy. We just need to add the ScrollView component. So let's import a new component called ScrollView from React Native. And we need to wrap those images inside this ScrollView. So let's add it here, ScrollView, and put all the code between them like this. Let's copy all of that code. Let's cut it and put it inside this ScrollView and press save. If you see here, now our app become scrollable. Look, we can go down and go up. Let's talk about some of the important properties for ScrollView. First, what if when we scroll go up and down, you can notice that this line here, this line, we want to get rid of it, this indicator. There is a property called show vertical scroll indicator, and you need to make it false and press save. Now we cannot see it again. It got disappeared. There is another property called horizontal. Let's make it true and see what happens. If we make it true, we make our scroll view is horizontal. We can go right and left, right and left. But if you see here, we got here an indicator. This line, we want to remove it. There is another property called show horizontal scroll indicator. Let's make it false. Now if you see, it got disappeared. What if you want to style our scroll view? There is a property called content container style, and it takes an object and you can add, for example, background color. Let's make it red. Now look, our scroll view become red. Sometimes you need to implement something in iOS and this something doesn't appear in Android. Or maybe the client requires from you some specific things for Android that is not in iOS. How to make different changes between Android and iOS? Let me show you. But first, let's clean up this code. Let's delete all of this and delete those styles too, and this function, and those unnecessary imports. Now we got a white screen in Android and iPhone. Let's add a text. Let's, for example, type, this is a Android device. And let's press save. We got here an issue. Property text doesn't exist. Why we got this issue? Because we used the text without importing it. So let's add comma and add text. Now let's save. Now the error is gone. And we have here, this is Android device. Oh, the text here is at the top. Let's make it in the center. Justify content, center. this justify content property to center things vertically. We're gonna talk about it later. Don't worry about it. Okay? I just added this line of code to make our text in the center of the screen vertically. Okay? And don't worry about it. We're gonna talk about it later. Now we got here. This is Android device. Let's remove this A. This is Android device. And here in iOS, this is Android device. And that's wrong. We want to type here, this is iOS device. So let's change Android to iOS and press save. Now in iOS, this is iOS device, and that's correct. But if we open Android, we got here, this is iOS device, and this is incorrect. How to make changes between Android and iOS? I want to show something here, and this something is different here. To do this, we're gonna use the platform. Just import platform from React Native. Okay? And now you can just type here inside this iOS, just open an object and type platform.os. If it's equal to, we got here options: Android, iOS, Mac OS, web, Windows. If it equals to Android, just type Android. Else, just type iOS. What is this code? Let me explain to you. I'm just telling him if the platform is Android, if you are using Android device, just render this word Android. Else render this word iOS. This question mark sign is called in JavaScript ternary operator. Okay, now if we press save and go back to our screen, now we can see this is iOS device and this is Android device, and both are correct. Let's implement another thing else. What if we want to make the color in iOS gray and the color in Android, for example, aqua, the background? Okay, that's easy. Let's go to our background color and do the same thing. If platform.os equals iOS, let's for example make it gray, otherwise make it aqua. Here is the background in iOS is gray and the background in Android is aqua. So platform is an API from React Native. You can import it from React Native to handle the different device type, for example, Android, iOS, Mac OS, Windows, or anything, or even web. In this lesson, we're gonna learn how to create loaders in React Native. First, let's clean this code. Let's remove this and remove this too. And let's import our activity indicator component. Activity indicator. This is the component you can import from React Native to create a loader. So now let's use it here and press save. Look, that's the loader in Android and that's the loader in iOS. Let's create another one and give him size of large. There is a small or large. You can use the large one. Look, now we've created right now, one is bigger. Here's in Android and here's in iOS. You can also change their colors using the color property. Color, we can make it darker blue. We can make it blue. Look, we have here, as we see here, a blue loaders. Can make it green. Now you can see green loaders. In this lesson, we're gonna talk about view component. You can think of view component as a wrapper to other component. to put them together, or a box to put the components in. Let me show you. To use view component, you need to import it, view, and let's render it here, view, and let's give it style view1. This is the style name of it, view1. And let's put the styles here. Let's press save. Let's give it some height. Let's make it, for example, 200. And width, 200 as well. And background color, for example, red. And let's press save. Now you can see our view here. Inside this view, you can put anything that you want. For example, we can put a text. So let's add text here. Let's type, for example, hello. You need to import the text from React Native because you are using it. Now you can see the text, the word hello here. Let's make the font size styles.text just to increase its font size. Text font size of, for example, 30, or let's make it 50. Now you can see the text here. You can put anything else inside this view. For example, let's add a text too. Let's rename it text2 and press save. Now we got here hello and text2. And you can make some styling for those texts. So the view is the container of other components. You can think about it as a box, and you put the other components inside it to give you control in styling. For example, we can make those in the center. If we just go to view 1 and add justify content center and press save, now the texts are in the center. Don't worry about this justify content. We're going to talk about Flexbox and justify content and align items later. So don't worry about it if you don't understand. And let's type align items center as well. Justify content here to center the text vertically. Align items here to center the text horizontally. You can make another view. Let's give it a styles. Let's give it a style of view 2. And now let's initialize this style down here. View 2. For example, let's give it background color, aqua, and let's give it height 150 and width 150 as well. Now we got here another view with aqua background color. You can also change those colors to hex colors. For example, let's try this one. Look, we changed the color of it to this hex color. We can also make this black if we are using this. Look, we changed the colors of the views. So the view component, you can think about it as a wrapper to other components, and this component is very useful and you're gonna use it a lot in your project. In this lesson, we're gonna talk about padding and margin. First, let's start with margin. If you want to create a space outside the border or outside the element, you can use the margin. For example, we want to add space here. This, the view 1, we can make margin bottom of 10 pixels and press save. Now we get here a margin bottom to this view. We can increase it to make it, for example, 50. Now we have here a 50 pixels of margin bottom to this view. Okay, we can delete it. We have also margin top. For example, let's add a margin top to this view, this black view, margin top of 50, and press save. Now you can see this black view has a margin top of 50. We add a spaces of 50 pixels. We also have margin left. Let's make it 100. Now we have here a margin left of 100 pixels to this black view. So we have here 50 pixels at the top and 100 pixels in the left. You can also add margin right. We also have margin horizontal and margin vertical. Let's remove those margins and add a new view to understand horizontal, to understand the vertical. Let's add a third view. And let's give it style of styles.view3. Okay, and let's initialize it down here. View 3. Let's copy this and put it here. And let's make the color of it red, for example. And let's press save. Now, what if we want to add a margin vertical to this black view? Margin vertical allow us to add spaces at the top and at the bottom. Let me show you. Margin vertical, for example, 40 pixels. Now you can see this view has 40 pixels at the top and 40 pixels at the bottom. We can also use margin to all different sides. For example, top and right and bottom and left. Just type margin alone. Now this margin take 40 pixels at the top and left and bottom and right. We can make it 100. Look, now this black box has a margin 100 here and 100 here and 100 here and 100 here. Okay. I want to mention something. If you specify a specific side, it will override this margin. For example, if we just add margin left of 20, it will be only 20. So 100 here, 100 here, 100 here, and 20 here. Even if this at the top here, it will still 20, because this margin left or right or top or bottom override only margin. Okay. Now that was the margin. Now let's learn about padding. When we go back to our code, let's create another view inside this view. For example, let's create a view. Let's give it style of styles.view, or let's make it child view, and let's add the style to it. Child view. The height and width, let's make them only 50 in height and 50 in width. And background color, let's make it red. Now we got here a 50 pixels dimensions view. Now let's describe what does padding do. The margin, as I have said, making spaces outside of the view, but the padding makes spaces inside the view itself. For example, we have here this black view called view 2. Let's add padding top and see what happens. For example, let's make it 30. Look what happens. This view added a space inside of it, not outside of it. So the padding adds spaces inside, the margin adds spaces outside. Let's add another padding. For example, let's add padding left and make it 60. Look what happens. We have here 60 pixels of padding. This black view added a space inside of it, not outside of it. So margin left add the space outside of 20, because this is a margin, so it add the space outside. But here we add padding left, added the spaces inside. So this 60 inside of the view. Let's add a padding in general. Padding, and let's make it, for example, 40 pixels. Now padding in general, add a padding inside the view of 40 pixels. here and here and here and here. 40 here, 40 here, 40 here, 40 here. So that was the key difference between margin and padding. Padding adds the spaces inside, margin adds the spaces outside. Now let's talk about Flexbox. With Flexbox, we can easily build complex layout that work consistently across different screen sizes. Flexbox in React Native is a little bit different in Flexbox in CSS. Because if you have familiar with CSS or you have a web background, you have to know that they are shared a lot of things, but there's a little bit different between them. So let me show you. I cleaned up our code and we have here a view. Let's give it a style. Let's give it background color of tomato and give it Felix of 1. What you see here? We see here a view with tomato color fill the entire screen because we give it a Felix 1. What if we give it Felix half? Now it fill the half of the screen only. Okay, now let's return it to white and let's make the Felix is 1 and let's add another view. I made it self-closed tag because I'm not gonna put anything inside it. Okay, just I'm gonna give it a style. Let's give it a Felix of 1 and background color tomato and press save. What we see here? We see here a view with background color white as a container to another view with background color tomato and take the Felix of 1. What if we add another views? For example, let's add another views. Let's add one like this and add another one. The first one is tomato. Let's make the second one is blue and the third one is gold, for example, and let's press save. What we see here? We see here 3 views. Each one of them are taking the third of the screen. Why it does take the third? Because this take one Felix of 1 and this Felix of 1 and this Felix of 1. And since we have 3 here, so every one of them are taking the third of the screen. If we just make this 2, it's gonna take the half of the screen. Let's press save and see. Look, now because this is Felix 2, it takes the half of the screen. So it takes 2/4 and this take 1/4 and this 1/4. Now that's the basics of Felix. Over the next few lessons, we're gonna learn more and more about Felix and learn more properties. In this lesson, we're gonna talk about Felix direction. First, let's remove this Felix and give width and height to each view. For example, let's give it width of 100 and height 100. And let's copy them and paste it here and here too. And press save. Now we have here 3 views with 3 colors. Now let's go to the container view. This white view is the container of those 3 views. Okay, now let's try Felix direction property. Felix direction. You have here column, column reverse, row, row reverse. Column is the default value, as you see here. You can use column reverse and press save. Now if you have a lock, it become at the bottom and it was reversed. For example, tomato at the bottom, then the blue, then the yellow, because they are reversed. We have also row, Felix direction row. If you press save, now we can see the views in the row way, not in the column way. We have also row reverse. As you see, they are still row, but they are reversed from right to left. I want to mention something important. When we make it column, the main axis is the vertical axis. Okay, the main axis is vertical axis. But when we make it row, the main axis is the horizontal axis. I'm gonna show you what does this mean. For example, let's make it column and press save. If we add, and let's try two important properties. The first property called justify content. When it's column, the main axis is the vertical axis. So when we make the justify content in the center and press save, see what happens? Our element become in the center in the vertical axis, as you see. And when we make align items center as well, you can see now they are in the center of screen horizontally. So align items, so justify content for vertical and align items for horizontal. Okay, when the main axis is vertical, okay. I would like to mention we have here many properties. Not only the center, we can make it Felix end to be at the bottom. We can make it Felix start to be at the top. We can make it space around to have a space around them and between them. We can make it space between. This is to make spaces between the element, and those spaces are equals. We can make it space evenly. This means to make spaces in the vertical axis and each space is equal to another, because for example this space equals to this space equals to this space equals to this space. Now let's return it to center. But now I want to show you something very important. Now the Felix direction is column, so the main axis is the vertical axis. What if we just make the Felix direction row? Now everything is gonna be different. Why? When the Felix direction is row, the main axis is gonna be the horizontal axis. What does this mean? Justify content is gonna be for horizontal, and align items is gonna be for vertical. Rules are gonna change. For example, if you want to center things vertically, you're gonna use align items like this. If you want to make it at the top here, you can make it Felix start. If you want to make them at the bottom, you can make it Felix end. If you want to make them in the center, just make them in the center. And justify content is gonna be for horizontal. For example, if you want to make it at the left here, just make the justify content Felix start. If you want to make it at the right, make it Felix end. If you want to add spaces horizontally, just make it space between or space around. If you want to make space between them, just space between. If you want to make spaces between them and around them and those spaces are equals, just pick space evenly. If you are notice here, you're gonna notice a value called baseline. What did this value do? I'm gonna show you. For example, let's imagine this tomato view has a height of, for example, 200. If we just make this in the center, it's gonna be like this. But if you want to make them at the same line, you can make it baseline like that. Now those are at the same line, so this is the value of baseline of align items. In this lesson, we're gonna talk about an important property called Felix wrap. First, let's get rid of this line of code. Then let's make this 100 pixels. Let's make them only 90. Okay. Now let's try to add more views. So for example, let's add a one view with the color gray, and let's add another one with the color green. Let's copy this and add another one. Now look, when we added two views, the yellow view got shrunk. It's not the size of it. If you see here, it must be 90 and 90, but it got shrunk because no space to it. So to solve this problem, we need to add Felix wrap property. So go up here in the container view and add this property. It's called Felix wrap. The default value is no wrap. We're gonna use the wrap value and press save. See, if you see here, the gold view now appeared and it's not shrunk because we've wrapped our views. But we have here an issue. Why our views go at the top, not in the center? Because when you implement Felix wrap, align items can't center vertically anymore. So you need to use another property called align content. So this property called align content, when you pass the value of center, now you can center it in the screen. In this lesson, we're gonna talk about absolute and relative position. What if I want to change the position or the place of this green view? How to do this? We can go to the green view and add a bottom of 20, for example, and press save. When we press save, you're gonna notice that we pushed the green view 20 pixels from the bottom. We can push it also from the left. Just type left 20 pixels. See what happens? We pushed it 20 pixels from the left too. So we have here a bottom 20 and the left 20. We can change this bottom and make it top. Now if you can see, we pushed it 20 pixels at the top and 20 from in the left. Okay, but the other views, the tomato view and the gold view, the places of them didn't change. Why they didn't change? Because by default, the position in React Native, this is a position property, is relative. That's the default value in React Native. Any component, the position of it, any view in React Native, the default value of position of it is relative. But what if I make it absolute? Absolute value. When I save the changes, this view is going to the top here and it's gonna take 20 pixels from the top and 20 pixels from the left. And those two views, tomato and gold, their places are gonna change. Let me show you. When I press save, look what happens. Their places got changed. And the green one go to the top of 20 pixels and the left of 20 pixels. We can add this top and make it 100 pixels. Look, now this is the space is 100 pixels and the left is 20 pixels. And those two, their places got changed because this is the absolute position. If we return it to relative, only the green one changed by 100 pixels to the top and 20 pixels to the left. But the other two views, there didn't change. They are still in their places. That was about absolute and relative positions in React Native. In this lesson, we're gonna talk about dimensions in React Native. I cleaned up all the code and only left a view with background color tomato and height and width 300. I wanna show you something. We have here two iOS devices. We get here iPhone 16 and iPhone 16 Pro Max. And I wanna show you something. Let's make the width of this view 400 and press save. Look what happens. In iPhone 16, the view covered entire the width of the screen. But in iPhone 16 Pro Max, there is a space. Why? Because iPhone 16 Pro Max dimensions is bigger than iPhone 16. And this will cause a problem in our application because the sizes will not be the same. How to handle this issue? This is for the width, and we're gonna face this issue in the height also. Look, if I make the height, for example, 850, look, the entire screen here in iPhone 16 is filled with a tomato view. But here we got here spaces. This is an issue, and how to solve those issues. First, you can set the height and width, not numbers like this. You can set it using three ways. Let me type them here. First, percentage. Second, dimensions. Third, libraries. Four, responsive. And we're gonna cover those three things in this course. First, let's talk about percentages. If you make the width here 100% like this, and the height only 15%, we're gonna cover the half of a screen in all devices. Let's press save and see. Look. Now here in iPhone 16, the half of the screen is filled also in iPhone 16 Pro Max, and the entire width is 100%, like I have said here, 100%. We can make it 50% of width and 100% of height and press save and see. If you see here also, look, the two screens are the same. So with this percentage, you make sure that all sizes in all devices are the same. Android, iPhone, iPhone Pro Max, Samsung, etc. or any device. This is for percentage. We have another way to make sure also our component sizes are the same in all devices. This way called dimensions. And this dimensions we can import it from React Native dimensions, and let us see what does this dimension do. Let's console.log dimensions.get. You have here two options, screen and window. The screen is the size of entire screen, of entire device screen. Okay, window is the size of visible window in screen. The window is a little bit smaller than screen size. In iOS, both are the same, screen and window, but in Android, window is a little bit smaller. So let's select screen and press save and see our log. Look here, we have here the height of 956 and the width 440. This is for iPhone 16 Pro Max because it's the bigger than the bottom here. So now let's define two constants for phone width and phone height. Let me show you. Const phone height equals to dimensions dot get screen dot height. Also, let's declare another constant called phone width is gonna be dimensions dot get screen dot width. Now we can access the phone height and the phone width. So now if we want to make this view fill the entire screen, we can give it the width and the height of phone width and phone height. Phone width and phone height, and press save. Now if you can see, we got here the entire screen is filled because we give it the width of phone width and the height of the entire phone height. Let's try to make it half of the screen. So let's make the height divided by 2 and press save to see. Now see, here is the half of the screen and they are the same, exactly the same. This is iPhone 16 Pro Max and iPhone 16. Let's divide also the width by 2 and see. Look, those are exactly the same. So with those dimensions, you can make sure that your app design is matching all the devices. But what if I want to give it here a value, for example, 100 pixels or something? How to make sure those are the same in the same devices? I mean, how make to sure this 100 is responsive in all devices? In this case, we're gonna use the third way, libraries for responsive. You can choose the library that you want to use. In this course, we're gonna cover one of the best libraries called React Native Size Matters. And we're gonna cover this library later in this course. In last lesson, we've covered the percentage and dimensions to make our screens responsive. But sometimes we need to add numeric values. And we cannot do this using percentage or dimensions. So we have another choice, and this choice is installing a library for handling responsibility of screens. Let me show you. But first, let's clean up this code. Let's remove this and remove this also. And remove this. And let's make this height, for example, 600 and the width 300 and press save. Now let's install a package called React Native Size Matters. This is the GitHub page of the library. If we scroll down, we get a lot of information. Now let's install this library using this command. npm install React Native Size Matters. So let's go to our terminal and open a new terminal and just type npm install the name of the package. When we press enter, we're gonna install this library to our app, and after install this library, we can use the functions of this library. Let me show you. Let's press enter. Now the library is installed, but to make sure we need to rerun our apps again. npm start, and let's press I to run iOS and wait. Now how to use this library? It's pretty easy. When you want to import something from React Native, you just type import this thing from React Native. To use this library is the same, import from React Native Size Matters. That's the name of the library. We can import a couple of functions that's gonna help us. First function is scale. The second function is vertical scale. This is scale to make screens responsive in the horizontal axis, and vertical scale make our UI responsive in the vertical axis. Okay, let me show you. If you can see the width of this view, this space here is bigger than here because this is iPhone 16 Pro Max is bigger than iPhone 16. So this space is bigger than this space, and this is cause an issue. Look. So instead of type 300, you just use this function, scale function. Just copy scale and open two parentheses and put the 300 inside it. Okay, and press save. Now, if you see, you're gonna notice that the width of this view is equal to the width of this view, as you see. Now let's go to the height. If you see, you're gonna notice this height is bigger than this height. Why? Because this iPhone 16 and it's smaller than iPhone 16 Pro Max. How to make them equal? We're gonna use the vertical scale function. Just copy it and put the 600 between it. Now let's press save and see. Look, now the spaces are equal. This space equal this space, and this space is equal this space. Despite those devices, screen dimensions are not the same, but the UI here is equal to the UI here, and it's gonna be the same UI in all devices, even Android or another iPhones or any device. If you think those two functions are bigger to write, this package allows us to use shortcut for them. For example, scale, you can import S and VS. This S is a shortcut for scale, and this VS is a shortcut for vertical scale. If you just replace this VS with vertical scale here and replace this S with scale here and press save, nothing is gonna happen because this S is working as scale and this VS is working as vertical scale. No differences. Now, if you open your app and go to package.json, you're gonna notice that this package is installed. Any installed package here inside these dependencies you can use. For example, you can use React to import the hooks. We're gonna talk about hooks later. You can use React Native to import React Native component, and here you can use React Native size matters to import those functions that's responsible for handling responsibility of UI to make our UI match all screen dimensions in all devices and appear as the same. In this lesson, we're gonna learn useState hook. useState hook is a hook from React. As I've said before, this is a React Native course. It's not a React JS course. So you need to learn React JS before you learn React Native. But you can start this course without learning React because any line of code that I've write about React, I'm gonna explain it. And since we're gonna use useState, so I have to explain it here in this course. So now first let's clean up this code. We don't need this line too, and import from React. We're gonna import a hook called useState. useState is a hook from React, and I'm gonna show you how to use it. Let's press save. First, let's add a text here, and let's add init 20. Okay. We need to import the text here from React Native and press save. Let's add justify content to center to see the number here. This is the number 20. Let's increase the font size. Font size equals to, font size is gonna be 40, for example, or let's make it 100. Now that's the number. Okay. What if you want to increase or decrease this number? How to use this? For example, I want to create a button here to increase the number and another button to decrease the number. So let's add two buttons. Button with title increase and another button and name it decrease. Let's put the increase before the text, like this. I want when I press on increase, this number got increased. And when I press decrease, this number got decreased. How to make this? Our hook today is gonna help us to do this. First, you're gonna type useState, and inside it, put your initial values. For example, this 20. So let's let's cut this 20 and put it here. useState hook is return an array. Okay, but we can destruct it. But we can destruct it to get those array elements, and those are state and set state. This state refers to this 20. So the state is equal to 20, this initial value. Okay? Until it get updated using set state. Let me show you. if I just copy this state here and put it right here and press save, look, nothing got changed. If I make this 10 and press save, now the number become 10. Why? Because this state until now refer to this initial state, refer to the 10. And when you want to change this state, you're gonna use this set state. For example, let's create a function to increase this value, to increase this state of 10. Okay, so let's create a function, const increase value equals to a JavaScript function, and we're gonna return set state. Set state is gonna take prev state and return prev state plus 1. Okay, and let's press save. Now when we call this function, our state is gonna be increased by 1. So let's go to this button and add this property onPress and pass in onPress increase value and press save. Now let's try our function increase value. Look, when we press increase, our number got increased. What happens here? Our state is now 16, not 10, it's 16 because we updated it using setState function. Okay, from this code, can you create a function that will decrease the number by 1? If you can make it, pause the video and do it. Now let's try a function to decrease the state. Let's type const decrease value equals to a JavaScript function, and we're gonna set state equals to prev state return prev state minus 1. It's the same function as the top here, but we're gonna just decrease by 1, not increase. Then let's add the onPress property to this button, this onPress property. We use it to do something when we press on this button. Okay, so just we're gonna fire this function decrease value. So now when we press on this button, we got decreased by 1, and when we press increase, we're gonna fire this function that's responsible to add the number by 1. So that was useState hook. It's a React hook, but it's very useful, and there is no React app without this hook because it's very useful to update the local state of the component. And this is a very important hook. And this hook is not for only numbers. You can pass here strings. You can pass here, for example, Boolean. You can put any state that you want and update this state using set state. Okay, if you think this hook is a little bit difficult, don't worry. In next lesson, we're gonna talk about React Native Modal, and we're gonna use this hook a lot in this course. So if you don't understand it until now, don't worry. We're gonna talk about it more and more and more because it's a useful hook, and we're gonna use it a lot in this course. The Modal component is a basic way to present content above an enclosing view. Let me show you. What if you want to display something above this screen? How to do this? First, you need to import the Modal component from React Native. Then you need to render it here. Modal. Okay. And let's press save. Now we are inside the Modal. Let's add, for example, a text. Let's let's type let's just type Modal is opened. Oops, we got here an error. Property text doesn't exist because we use the text without importing it from React Native. So let's import it. Now, if you see here is the text at the top here. We can make it. We can give it style to make it more visible. Font size, for example, 90. Oops, this is very big. Let's make it 50. And let's give it margin top of 50, for example. Now you get the text here, Modal is opened, because the default value of Modal is visible. If you want to make it not visible, just you need to add this property, visible, and make it false, like this, and press save. Now the Modal is not visible. If we just return it true, now Modal is open. You can add animation type, for example, slide. Now if you switch the Modal, see what happens? It got slide from top to the down. Let's make it true and see. Look what happens. It got from down to the top. You can make it a slide or fade, but I prefer slide. Okay, that's the animation type. Now we want to open the Modal and close the Modal from buttons. How to do this? To do this, we're gonna use the useState hook that we've talked about before. So let's import it from React. useState from React, and let's create useState, and the initial value is gonna be false, because we want the initial value of the Modal is gonna be false. And this useState hook is return an array. This array has two elements. First, the state, and the second, the set state. We can rename the state of Modal visible. And the set state is gonna be set Modal visible, like this. So now we can update the state using this set Modal visible, and we can use the state using this Modal visible. So instead of passing true, we're gonna pass Modal visible here and press save. So the Modal is closed. If we just make this true, it's gonna be open. Okay? And false is gonna be closed. So now let's create a function. When I press on this button, we're gonna open this Modal. For example, this button, let's add onPress property. When I press on this button, we're gonna create a function called, and inside this function, we're gonna set this Modal visible to be true. So now when we press on this button, show Modal, not model, sorry for this mistake. When I press on show model button here, we're gonna set the Modal visible to be true. Let me show you. Look, now it's visible. Now let's add another button here to make this Modal closed. So let's inside this Modal, we can copy this line of code and change it like this. We can only change this show to close Modal, and instead of set Modal visible true, we're gonna make it false to close it. Now when we press on close Modal, now Modal is gone. Now we can show it and close it, show it and close it. Thanks for this hook, useState hook. Now here inside this Modal, you can render anything that you want over the screen, above another screen. In this lesson, we're gonna talk about icons. Look at this Modal. It's better than this button, close Modal. We use an icon, X icon or close icon. It's gonna be better. So let's open this website called Expo Vector Icons. And let's search for icon, for example, close. And let's try to pick any one of them. Let's try to pick this one. Just press on it and copy those two lines of code. Copy and paste it here. Then let's copy this line too to render it. And go in our Modal and paste it here. Now if we press save, we can find the icon here. Look, and its color is black. You can change the size of it. For example, you can make it 50 to make it bigger. And you can also change the color, for example, to make it red. Okay? And you can add the onPress property to make something when you press on it. So we can copy this function that's responsible for closing the modal and paste it here. And let's press save. Now when we press in this close icon, we can close the modal. You can also use a lot of icons. For example, you can search for car. You can search for shop. You got here shop and shopping cart, shopping bag. We can copy this. We can open this, just copy this line and paste it at the top here, and go here and copy this too and paste it, for example, here under this line, and press save. Now see, we got here an icon of the shop. We can change the color of it. Let's make it tomato, and let's make the size 100 or even 300. Look. So you can use Expo vector icons to render a lot of icons. Rendering the icons from Expo is better than using images PNG. As I've mentioned before, images, any image that you are using the require function to load it locally from local project is gonna affect the project because it's gonna increase the bundle size, and this is not good for performance. So it's better to use Expo vector icons for icons or use SVG icons, and we're gonna talk about SVG later. But it's not good to use PNG as icons. In this lesson, we're gonna talk about image background component. What if you want to render an image as a container instead of this gold view? For example, I want the background of the app is an image, not this gold view. How to do that? React Native provide us a very good component called image background. This component. And we can replace this view with image background. But we need to add to this image a very important property called source. In this source, we're gonna put the source of the image. I got this image here, and I want to render it as the background of the app. So let's go to assets and open them and include this image inside our assets. Just drag and drop. Now our image in our app assets. So let's render it. Let's go to app.tsx. And the source is gonna be, we're gonna use the require function because we're gonna load it locally from our app. How to reach to this path? Since we are in the same folder, or we're gonna open a folder in the same root, for example, there is app.tsx and this is assets. So both are in the same root. So we're gonna just add one dot. Okay? Inside it, we're gonna use the assets folder. This assets folder. Inside assets folder, we're gonna type this name, background.png. So let's copy its name and add slash and paste it here and press save. Now our image is filling our app background. We can put any UI we want inside this image background. For example, let's include a white view. For example, view, style, background color. Let's make it white. Let's give it height 200 and width 200 as well. Let's press save. Now this is the view here. We want to make it here in the center, so we can add those styles to image background because now image background is our container. So let's add justify content in the center and align items center to make this white view in the center here. Let's add some border radius to our white view. border radius. Let's make it, for example, 15. This is to make a little radius here inside our view. You can also render anything inside this white view. For example, let's add a text with hello world and press save. Oops, we got here an error. Property text doesn't exist because we are using the text without importing it from React Native. So let's import it and press save. Now we got here a hello world. You can also use the image background source from URI, exactly like the image. If you just open a new object and type URI and put any link that you want from internet. Let me try any link. Let me copy this image link and put it here and see and press save. Look, we got here an image background. Let's try this one also. Let's copy that and paste the link here. Look, this is another image background you can use in your app. So image background is a very helpful and useful component you can use to add a background to your app. You can use the URI and put any link from the internet, or you can use the require function. That was all about image background. See you in next lesson. In this lesson, we're gonna talk about one of the most important components in React Native, and it's called TextInput. TextInput is a core component for inputting text. Let me show you. Let's first import it from React Native, TextInput, and let's render it here. TextInput. First, let's give it some styling to make it appear. Let's give it height 40 pixels, width 800% of the screen, border radius 4, border width 1, border color, for example, gray, and let's press save. Now we got here our text input. If we click on it, the keyboard should be opened. If keyboard not opened, you can try Command and K to switch the keyboard. Command and K if you are using Mac. If you are using Windows, Control and K. Okay. So now when you press on this text input, you should see this keyboard. Now let's talk about a couple of important properties. The first property called placeholder. Placeholder is the text displayed when the input is empty. For example, let's type here, enter your name and press save. Now if you see, we got enter your name text. When you type something, the text disappear, but when you clear the input, the placeholder appear. Enter your name. The second property is keyboard type. Keyboard type. For example, you can make it URL. If we press save, nothing changed. I think we need to reload the app. To reload the app in simulator, you just need to press Command and R. If you are using Windows, just press Control and R. So now let's reload it and press here again. Now if you see, the keyboard changed. A dot and slash and .com appeared because the keyboard type is a URL. Let's change it, for example, to make it numeric and press save. I don't know why keyboard didn't change until we reload. I don't know why. So let's please reload the app and try again. Now you can see our keyboard now is numeric. We can make it numeric and punctuation. For example, we want to add the asterisk and sharp here. So let's make it numeric and punctuation and press save. We need to reload our app again. Sorry for this. Just press Command and R. And now if we try, look, our keyboard changed. It become numbers and punctuation. Let's return this keyboard type to default. And we need to reload again. You can also reload from the terminal. If you just open the terminal and press R here, you can reload the app also. Now our keyboard returned as default. Now let's try another property. There is a property called secure text entry. You can use this property if you want to enter a password or something. Let's make it true. Now when you type something, look, what you type isn't appear to other. It appear as password because you set secure entry to true. Now let's comment this. We have also another property called multi-line. Multi-line, if you make this property true, now you can type a multi-line. You can make your input is a multi-line input like this. We have another property also called editable. If we make it editable, if this editable prop is true, you can edit this text input. But if it's false, you cannot edit this input. Look, when I press here, I cannot edit. I can just copy the text, but I cannot edit it. But I can't edit it. So let's return it to true again. Now we can edit the text. I want to mention something. If your prop is equal to true, you can remove this true. This equal and true. Just remove them and it will work as you can pass the true value here. Okay? So no need to add equals true. Just keep it like this. Okay? But if it's false, you need to type false. Okay? But if it's true, just make it like that. Finally, how to control this input. For example, I want to get the text that I write here in this input and use this text to allow the app to take the input from user. To do this, you have to assign two main properties. The first one is the value, and the second one is onChange text. This value refers to the current text value in the input, and this onChange text is a callback triggered when the text changed. Let me show you. But first, to control them, let's create a useState hook to control our text. So let's define a useState hook. Let's make it empty because we want to make our input is empty. Don't forget to import our useState from React hook. And now useState, and as you've learned before, useState is returning an array of two elements. The element 1 is the state, and element 2 is set state. The state here is the text input. The set state here is the set state text. So let's make it set text, and let's store them in constant. Okay, so now let's copy this text. Let's copy this text and put it here inside the value. And let's copy this set text to put it inside onChange text and press save. Now this text variable can tell you what user just type in this input. For example, let's log it. User type and text. Add the text here. Let's log this. This line of code refers that we want to only log this text variable. Okay, now let's press save and go to the terminal. Let's clean the terminal and let's type anything we want. For example, my name. My name. Look what happened. We can log my name in the console because this name or this text now is stored inside this text variable. So you can use this text variable in any operation that you want. For example, to send it to the server or to send it as HTTP request to the backend or anything. Or we can also render it here. Let me try to render it here. Let's add here a text. And let's just type my name is and add the text here. And we got here a red line because we need to import the text from React Native. Like this. And let's press save. Now look, if we see here, my name is my name. So let's try to delete this and just type my name is Ahmed. Look, now my name is Ahmed. So that was our text input. If you think it's a little bit hard, don't worry. You can try to watch the video again. And if you still not understand how to control text or how to handle text, don't worry. We're gonna use this text input more and more in this course. So don't worry about that. But it would be great if you understand this lesson well. In this lesson, we're gonna learn how to create a React component. Look at this screen here. This is a simple screen. We've rendered all the UI and components in app.tsx, and this is not a good practice. And it's better to separate each component in each file. Let me show you. Let's go to our folders and create a new folder called src. Inside src, we're gonna create a new folder called components. And inside this components, we're gonna separate this UI from app to many components. For example, this image is gonna be component, and this text and this subtitle. Okay, let me show you. First, let's go and create a component for the image. For example, let's name it app logo image.tsx. React component can be class component or functional component. And the modern way in creating components is the functional component. So let's create a functional component. Functional component, it's like the JavaScript function. Let's define a function, const. Let's name it app logo image equals to. It's a function. And we're gonna return a UI. For example, let's return a view. To use view, you need to import it from React Native. So let's import view from React Native. Now we've created our component, but we cannot use it in another screens. Why? Because we didn't export this component. So we need to export it using the export default and the component name. This name, you can pick any name that you want, but make sure that you are using a name refers to the component, okay? Because you're gonna get in your project later a lot of components, so you have to give each component a unique name. When you read the name of the component, you know this component, okay? Now finally, we're gonna create the style sheet. This is for styling, StyleSheet dot create, and we need to import it from React Native as well, StyleSheet. Now what we've done here, we first import the view and StyleSheet because we're gonna use them. Then we've created a JavaScript function that is returning a UI. Finally, we've exported this function, this functional component. So we can use this component in app.tsx or in any file of our project. We can use it anywhere. Finally, we've defined the styles for this component. So now let's go and copy the image. We're here in app.tsx. Let's cut this image. Let's cut it and press save. And go here and paste it here. Let's replace it with this view. Like this, we're gonna return an image. This red line because we didn't import the image. We need to import the image from React Native. Image. Now the errors are gone. And instead of passing those styles, the width and height as inline style, it's better to put the styles here in StyleSheet. Okay, so let's cut them and define styles dot, for example, image. And go down here and type image and paste our styles. And finally, let's format our document. So let's right click and press on format document to make the code looks better. Now let's press save. Let me show you something. What if this line of code is not exist. For example, let's comment it. When we comment a code, we cannot use it. Okay, so now let's go to app.tsx and try to import app logo image. We cannot import it, and we can't also get the image. Look, we have a red line here because it's not defined and we cannot import it. But if we go there and uncomment this line of code, now you can import it. How to import it? You can use auto import like this. In Mac, using like this, auto import, or you can get its path. How to get its path? That's pretty easy. You can open the folders and you have to locate the component path. You can easily copy it, copy relative path, and paste it here. So he is in src components applogo.tsx. I'm gonna teach you how to make it without the help of VS Code. It's pretty easy. You are here in the root folder, okay, and you want to get the src. The src in the same root with app.tsx. So you just need to type import the component name from, because app.tsx in the root with ssrc, so you need to add this one dot, only one dot. Then pick the src folder. Then pick the components folder. Then type the component name app logo image. Now let's press save. Look, the logo appears here. Now you've learned how to create a React component and use it anywhere. Let's try to create another component for this text. Let's name it. Let's create a new component. Name it welcome text.tsx. And let's do the same thing. Let's create a function called welcome text. And let's gonna return. What are we gonna return? We're gonna copy that code, those texts here, and let's create a view. And those red line, because we didn't import the view and text, so let's import them. Import view and text from React Native. Let's format our document to look better. Finally, let's export this text. Export default custom text, welcome text, and let's press save. Then let's go there and down here in app image, app logo image, let's add the welcome text. We can make the auto import for it from src component welcome text. Then let's press save. A little change happened because we put our text inside a view. If we just remove the view, look, it became as before. But you have to know something. You cannot, in React, you can't return two elements. For example, if I remove this fragment, we got error because you return two elements. In React, you need to return a one element or wrap those two elements in something called React fragment. React fragment, like this. And you have to wrap them inside React fragment. Like that. React fragment here and down here. You have to type React fragment and you need to import React from React. Or there is another way, and this is a better and easier. Just delete React fragment here and delete React fragment here and press save. Look, nothing happens. So in React, when you want to return two elements, you just wrap them between React fragment. Okay, this is a basic React. Now if you see, our code looks cleaner. You can do the same thing for this text, create another component to this text. So you need to know in our app, we use multiple components and separate each or any piece of UI into a component.